Okay, we are recording.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Snyder from the Connect and Communicate Series Planning Committee, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I also want to thank Sarah, who will be doing closed captioning during this session. For reference, our presentation will be recorded and made available to Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division members through the PLA website. We'll also have a link to our the webinar on YouTube. This session is brought to you by the College and Research Division Board, and I'd like to thank the CRD Board for supporting the Connect and Communicate initiative. If you're, as Erin said before, if you're in a room with others, please add the number of attendees to the chat box so we can gauge how many people are actually attending with us today. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So our panelists today are Elizabeth Scott, Rachel Walton, and Heidi Abby Moyer, who will be speaking on transparency in the tenure process, a frank discussion on earning tenure and thriving as an archivist in academia. Elizabeth Scott is currently the archivist and special collections librarian and assistant professor at East Stroudsburg University in Pennsylvania. Rachel Walton is a junior faculty member and the digital archivist and records coordinator at Rollins College, a private liberal arts school in Winter Park, Florida. Heidi Abby Moyer is the archivist, humanities reference librarian, and coordinator of archives and special collections at the Penn State Harrisburg Library in Middletown, Pennsylvania. During their presentation, if you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat box. I'll be monitoring that and making a list of questions for our attendees. And after their presentation's over, we'll open up the floor for attendees to ask their questions. And again, I'll have that list as we're going along. So with that, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you so much, Amy. This is Liz Scott speaking. We wanted to first thank the Pennsylvania Library Association's College and Research Division for allowing us to do this webinar today, and especially the Connect and Communicate series. We're very interested in this topic, and we hope that you are too. I just wanted to let you know that although all three of us are archivists, we do have dual roles as a librarian and archivist in our institution. So a lot of the things that we'll be speaking about today could also relate obviously to librarians. So you may hear a few terms that are specific to archives, but for the most part, since you'll also see that a lot of, there isn't a lot of structure specifically for tenure for actual archivists. It's really in a library setting. So you'll hear some archival terms, but mostly this can relate to archives, archivists or librarians. So just wanted to throw that in there. So we're very excited to get started, so I will get started with the slides here. And thank you, Amy, for that introduction. Here's all of our contact information that will be also at the end. She already mentioned that the webinar is being recorded, so look for that YouTube link. Hopefully that will be sent out, so if you do miss it or want to pass it on to a friend, that will be available. She talked about the questions of how we can facilitate the questions at the end. And then again, like our contact information will be available if you need to email us or have any questions after the panel is over. So really the purposes of this webinar, we wanted to sort of talk about tenure and be transparent in the tenure process because it really, sometimes it's shrouded in a little bit of mystery. And it's difficult to understand sort of what the expectations are of tenure. We also wanted to really talk about mentoring in academia and how that can be very important to you as an archivist or a librarian. And so we today wanted to share our experiences as academic archivists in a library setting or, working as dual roles. And this really was sort of born out of my interest, although I've been an archivist for close to 20 years now and have held academic positions. This was the first position that was actually a tenure track position for me. So, there was lots of, a lot of things that I wanted to learn about. So when I went searching for articles and blogs and websites and just, were there any panel presentations about this, there just wasn't a ton of information out there. So I got in contact with Heidi, who has been a friend of mine since graduate school, and sort of we've been working together in the same venues and things. And we then hooked up with Rachel, and that was kind of how we all three got together. And it was really because we did want to present this at SAA, but we found some staggering statistics essentially on presentations and how few opportunities there are for archivists to present things. We learned some statistics that ALA, for example, in 2017, drastically reduced their sessions. They got rid of conference rooms, I think it said 45%. So that meant fewer sessions for people to attend. That was because of declining membership and increased conference fees. But if you take away the amount of sessions people can do, then you just don't have time to present. And the same with ACRL at ALA. We've learned that only about 16% of the proposals were accepted for the conference, which is not a lot. So the opportunities to present are, again, slimmer. And then the same with SAA. We had the problem of submitting for a proposal, but out of 185 proposals, they only took 72, which was 39%. So the ways to present, and if you need this for tenure, are a little bit less than we should have. So that's kind of a basis of why we wanted to do this. A quick outline today. We're going to be talking about part one I will be speaking about tenure in the early years, since I'm really only in the first year of my tenure process. Then Rachel will be speaking about the mid-tenure process. Part three will be by Heidi, and she's going to be talking about tenure and promotion and then post-tenure reviews. We have a section of discussion on challenges, some final thoughts, and then time for questions and answers. So with that, I think I'll just begin now with a basic overview of the tenure structure and some early process of tenure. So just to be clear, this will vary by institution. You're going to hear today, some of us are going to sort of go into a little bit of basic details about some of the structure of tenure at our institutions, and that's really only just to give you a little bit of context. But we're not going to go too deep into the weeds with extreme specifics, because obviously what happens at Penn State is different than ESU, is different than Rollins, is different from your institution. But we are going to touch briefly on maybe some basic structures. You should all have some sort of formal written criteria or requirements for tenure, whether this is like a governing document or some sort of thing like that. You should all have that. If you don't, then that's a problem. But I'm sure there is some sort of governing document that states, your tenure situation. Everyone will have different years. Some institutions, you only have 3 years, some are 5 years, some are 6-year tracks. It sort of depends, again, on each institution. I believe all three of us are on all different tracks, so that's interesting. We stated before that there's a dual role of librarians and archivists. We all serve as sort of librarians in our institutions. I do reference questions and teach library classes, and I'm a liaison, and everybody has those other responsibilities, along with being the archivist or one of many archivists at your institution. And then essentially you will all be reviewed by a committee, whether it's every 2 years or 4 years or 3 years, whatever those numbers happen to be. There'll be some sort of formal reviews that you will go through in this process at some point. Quick tenure criteria at ESU. We are in a union, which is called APSCUF, Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties. And say what you want about unions, but they are kind of nice. They do give you pay raises and representation, and some people don't want to pay the dues, et cetera, but there's probably more benefits to being in it than not being in it. We are considered non-classroom faculty, and I'll explain that a little bit later. There are no specific guidelines for librarians versus archivists. We're kind of thrown into this non-classroom faculty, and there's really no specific guidelines since our profession is so different, but I'll show you that as well. 5 years to obtain tenure, and must submit a yearly review once a year on my teaching, scholarship, and service. So that means every single year I have to do this. Now, some institutions, again, you'll see are like every 2 years or 3 years, but every year I have to do this. And then there's some unwritten rules like publications and second masters. Even throughout the PASHE system, which is the Pennsylvania State System for Higher Education, there's 14 schools. Even within those schools, we all have different sort of unwritten criteria that maybe nobody talks about a little bit. Oh, you have to publish an article in a peer-reviewed journal. Oh, I only have to get a master's degree. So those are kind of the unwritten things, which people don't tell you about until you get into the position, but just keep that in mind. Just want to show you this is our governing document. We joke in the library that we call it the Holy Grail. It's the APSCUF and PASHE contract between the union and the state system of higher education. It's a book that they publish, and then they also have online. But this is really the document that spells out everything for you. Article 12 is the most important one that talks about your responsibilities as a faculty member, your teaching, scholarship, and service. And then, because we are librarians and archivists, Article 12, Section D actually has this little caveat here. It says, evaluation of faculty members whose basic areas of responsibility lie outside the classroom. And that's essentially where they lump in librarians, archivists, and there's some other groups on campus, like I want to say some of the health professionals are in there, not coaches, they have their own thing, but so that's where we kind of get away from being based on our teaching. What this does, it has less emphasis on teaching semester-long courses. I don't teach semester-long courses. I teach, 1 or 2 hour library classes, and it has more emphasis on our job descriptions. But again, there is no official criteria for librarian and archivist. It would be nice if that was sort of spelled out a little more. So I feel like sometimes we're trying to put like a round peg into a square hole, trying to fit ourselves into this scheme. And since I've just been successfully through my first year, there's a couple hints that I think are really important to learn. Essentially, learn the system. You want to have an organization to your tenure process. Make sure you're taking advantage of mentorships and making connections. And I'll go into a little bit of detail about that. Learning the system just simply means be familiar with that governing document. Study that red book, study that thing online, whatever your document happens to be, because really essentially for us, that's like a legal binding document. You should know the criteria inside and out so that if something does arise in your tenure process, you know what section to dispute or, call up if there is a problem. I felt like my first year there was tons of jargon that I needed to learn about sabbaticals and retrenchment and strikes and all kinds of things. So just make sure you take the time to kind of learn the jargon that's out there, get to know, what does promotion mean versus tenure, what does all that stuff mean. And then make sure you attend workshops on promotion and tenure. You might think, well, I'm only in my first year, tenure's 4 years away, 5 years away. I'm just going to hold off and wait. I would disagree and say try to do that as soon as you can. If they offer those workshops, your first year, take them, because it really sets you up to know what you can expect down the line. Another thing is know your union reps or administration. Like I said, I'm in a union, so who are your representatives in the union? Who are the people you go to speak with? Maybe for other people, it's their dean or a provost. Just know who you can talk to, essentially, if you have questions, whether that's your department chair or whoever that might be. Just kind of get to know the system. And there is definitely a learning curve the first year. One part about organization, I like to write it all down. So I have a planner that I write everything down in, my reference schedules, my classes that I teach, when my interns come, when I worked on my research, and then I try to code all of that. You can see on the right-hand side, it talks about teaching, scholarship, and service as a 1, 2, and 3, and then I'll try to code all that, because when you're trying to go back after a year and figure out all the stuff you've done, or even write a semester-long report, it's really difficult to remember all of that. So I think the more organized you can be about that, the better. If you prefer your Outlook calendar, that's fine. I do the same thing too. So I sort of sync all my calendars, I write it down. It might seem like overkill, and then I also do this. I write my work activity, what did I do for that month. It takes a couple minutes to do it, and I think it's a really nice way that you can organize yourself, and again, it'll help you write your reports that you have to write instead of trying to sit there and remember all the things you've done, because you've probably done a ton of things. And then that really helps with your yearly tenure binder. Since I have to do one of these things yearly, it's constantly on my mind, my tenure binder, put this in your tenure binder. When we do go up for our yearly tenure binder, we have a committee of 3 people, that's our tenure committee, who reads our binder and sees all the activities we've done and the classes we've taught and the presentations and the exhibits and all the stuff we've done over the year, passes it on to our department chair. Department chair reads the binder, writes a letter, passes that on to Dean of Library, and you can see how this goes up to the provost, to the president, and they do this for every single person who is, not tenured. So it's a lot of work for them, but they must like it. Just a quick shot. We are still doing paper binders. You'll hear from a colleague next, Heidi, who's got a really cool online version of this, but this is quite an undertaking with organization. There's table of contents. I've got footnotes in this thing. It took a lot of work and effort for this. And this, I was only here. They make you do your tenure in January. So it's very quick. You only have about 3 or 4 months. So it's hard to even say how much you've done in that short of time. Quick thing about mentorship, just take advantage of, opportunities to meet faculty and staff. If there's any orientation or mentor programs, please, participate in those. We had a great one at ESU where each month we did a new aspect of the university and got together with the faculty, new faculty cohort that I was in. Keep in touch with those folks. You never know when you're going to need those friends down the line for something. And then just really take advice from any tenured faculty because they really want to help you. So accept that advice. And my last thing I would say is making connections. Get involved. You don't just have to do your, work and do your job and just, 9 to 5 and just teach library classes and doing the work in the archives. Make sure you do get out on campus and experience things like holiday parties, or if there's a lecture series, sign up for extra events if you can, like One Book, One Campus, to host that. Be ambitious, but don't bite off more than you can chew. The first year is quite difficult, and you'll soon realize what you can and cannot do, but have fun all at the same time, but, be ambitious. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to talk about the overview of the mid-tenure process.
Thanks, Liz. My name's Rachel Walton. I am a third-year tenure track faculty member here at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. And what I am excited to talk to you guys about today is what to expect when you're halfway there at the midpoint mark. And so, sorry, I'm getting a little crazy with the slides, you guys. There you go. So I am entering into my 4th year, and it's pretty typical at that point to have had or be entering a mid-course review. And so what does that mean? Well, it's kind of the same as all your annual reviews, except for the dossier of materials that you submit is usually evaluated by an external faculty committee that is cross-campus and not just within your department. So the stakes are kind of higher, but what I'm hoping to reinforce for you guys today is that you can do it. There are doable goals that you can achieve by your mid-course, and I'm hoping to give you guys some pointers and some suggestions on how you can ready that portfolio. And I'm also going to argue that this is not just this scary thing that you have to try and get through. I have really appreciated the opportunity at mid-course to consider where my career is and where it could be going. And so I'm going to encourage you guys to take that look as well, to be positive in your self-reflection moment. This is just a little bit about what tenure looks like at Rollins. Like Liz was saying, it looks different everywhere, kind of. What you will see similarities is the 3 areas that we're evaluated in: librarianship, which includes teaching, scholarship, and we have kind of very specific guidelines for that, and then service. Here we go. So the scary one that no one wants to talk about, scholarship. Well, if you take nothing away from what I'm going to say today, I would say make sure that you protect your time for writing and research. No one else is going to do that but you. And if you don't do that, you're going to find time passing on without some kind of deliverable for your scholarly work. And that's a scary moment. So the goal that I would say to everyone at this moment, before the mid-tenure mark, is to establish a pattern of active research and scholarship, whatever that might look like for you. Try and be consistent with that pattern. Don't go 4 years before showing back up on the publication radar or doing another presentation. And really leverage the possibility of writing about what you do every day in your work and implementing what you're choosing to write about. I would argue that that is kind of a mutually informing circle of practice and publication. And not all professions really benefit from that really efficient mode. So take advantage of that and let people know what you're working on. Write about it. I've also benefited from a support group. I have writing collaborators across campus and in the library I work with, and that's really a nice place to be, somebody who can hold your hand and help you edit, and also be there when maybe you don't get your first article that you submitted published, right? It can be a scary space, but it's good to have colleagues who will support you. I have decided also that I want to have a diverse portfolio. So in addition to doing maybe articles or chapters, I would also say get out there and do some presentations, maybe even host a webinar. We're trying this out today. We'll see how it goes, but you know we're going to put it in our portfolio. And also make sure you have a newsletter or a listserv where you can stay up to date on hot button issues and weigh in when you feel like you have the expertise to benefit your community, because that can be a feather in your cap later. All right, well, librarianship is one of the 3 pieces that we're evaluated on. And a realistic goal in thinking about where you should be at the midpoint towards tenure in this is being able to talk about what you're contributing to the institutional mission. And this is going to be kind of a weird thing for some people, because you've got to be able to be proud and loud, okay? You've got to be able to toot your own horn and be ready with statistics and impressive projects and even grant award funding, and be able to talk about the contribution that you are giving to your campus, because you do a lot of important work, and this is not the time to be shy about it. In addition, you really want to have an elevator speech about what you as an archivist specifically bring to the table in terms of contribution to the college. That's not something that everyone on your faculty evaluation committee, that external group, is going to necessarily understand when they first come across your dossier. So be ready to tell them exactly what you do and why it's important. And finally, and this is something I think Heidi will be able to talk about a little bit more when you hit the tenure mark, have letters of support from senior faculty, including your mentors, that can kind of bolster support for you, because that can be really meaningful for that committee. I kind of set teaching apart here, though we always include it as part of our librarianship in our dossier. And the reason that I did that is because I really think it's an opportunity for archivists to show impact on campus, since we do engage in a lot of curricular instruction. But I also want to stress that in order to show effectiveness in your teaching, you really need to have data. Okay, all faculty across campus need to have their student evals, right, incorporated into their dossier. We're no different. We need to know if we're being effective. We can get that information from students or from fellow faculty who invite us into their classroom. And number 2, you really need to consider yourself a professor, an educator, and you need to be able to have a pedagogical foundation for what you're doing in the classroom. For me, that took a little bit of research into what teaching and learning looks like now in a digital space in the 21st century. But it really gave me a chance to think about, okay, this is my style, this is my philosophy of teaching, and the reason I'm doing this is because. And that's what I mean by pedagogical foundations, and that's going to be really effective when you're in front of a committee of fellow educators. Finally, I just want to make it clear, service is a part of how you're evaluated, but the well-kept secret here at Rollins is that service is not going to be the reason that you don't get tenure. So what I've got here for you guys are some options, right? You could go kind of above and beyond and get elected into faculty governance. You could maybe take a more baby step and serve on campus committees. You could try and provide, get some leadership within your professional organization, either locally or at the regional level. One of the places I found a real niche is volunteering as editor or reviewer or copy editor for a journal that I'm passionate about. And I think that's kind of a sweet spot because you're encouraged to publish as well. And just be creative. I also teach, tech classes to local seniors in my community, okay? And I put that on there. So don't be shy about how you describe your service. And finally, don't let this be the way that you overcommit yourself. Because guess what? Mid-course is when you see a huge amount of burnout. There is only so long that people can handle this breakneck pace of teaching and publication and librarianship work that's 12 months of the year sometimes. And so what I kind of want to end here with is to be good to yourself, give yourself time away and the space you need to revitalize, and then come back into work refreshed, because people who don't do that, they experience burnout. I'm just going to end with a plug to say approach mid-course, your midpoint, and think of it as a springboard for you. Lots of people realize at this stage that academic libraries or archives on the tenure track is not for them. They're either not shining in their portfolio or they're seeing that it's just too much for them to manage. That's okay. We have a profession where about half of us work in that kind of role and half of us don't, right? So it's an opportunity for you to say, okay, am I on the right track? Number two, and I know this is something Heidi's going to focus on, make sure that you are showing progress in the critical areas that your review committee members say that you need to focus and improve on. If you don't do that, it's very likely that you will not get tenure. You really need to show progress in those areas that they say are not yet up to snuff. And finally, a lot of people who end up being academics for life find themselves at this mid-tenure moment thinking big and about what kind of leadership they might want to have in the future, what kind of institution they may want to end up at, if they want to be in a director role. Give yourself time to think about that too. This should be an opportunity for you as well as your reviewers to think about what the future looks like for your work. And now I am very excited to hear from Heidi about what to expect at tenure and even after that. So I'm going to let her take on over.
Okay, thanks very much, Rachel. This is Heidi Abbey Moyer from Penn State Harrisburg. I'm going to be talking about what happens to you in your last years, hopefully going forward with tenure. And at Penn State University, we have, just like what Liz and Rachel already talked about, we have a different process. We have a second year, a fourth year, and a sixth year, which is your final promotion and tenure review. There's also the pillars of librarianship, research, and service, which we've already heard about from both Liz and Rachel, and our policy, which is online. I'm trying to get the slide to move forward here. Ah, great. We have all of our policies online that anybody can visit. So I have the web address up there at the top of the screen. This is not behind a firewall. It's not something that is on our intranet site. Anybody can take a look at this and review our criteria, which are very specific. So I'm not going to go into more detail about that. I also want to put a plug in and say that at Penn State University, there is extreme amount of support for promotion and tenure. There's a formal libraries mentoring program. So as soon as you are hired on the tenure track, a mentor is assigned to you who is already tenured. And I know that that relationship is very valued. I have several mentees, one of whom is on the tenure track. And I try to meet monthly, either in person or on the phone or in Zoom. There's also an annual promotion and tenure workshop that's sponsored by our faculty governance group. And I have to say that when I was on the tenure track at Penn State, I had a fabulous tenure cohort. There were about 8 of us, and we created a private Facebook group. So we could privately communicate with each other about different questions that we had. We also had meetings during our annual promotion and tenure workshop, so it was extremely supportive. In terms of our dossier, Liz mentioned that we do have an automated system. It's a database of sorts called Digital Measures, Diem for short. And essentially we input all the different components of our dossier into this system, and you can then automatically format and control the output of it. So we put in our personal name, our statement of core responsibilities, our narrative statements, which basically describes what you do. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that, as well as all of your accomplishments, supplemental file. And this next screenshot shows you the dashboard for Digital Measures. So this is a proprietary product that we license. It's also used by the teaching faculty at Penn State, not just the librarians and archivists. So it's a place to put your narrative statement for your P&T reviews, for your annual review, a place to list your goals and objectives for your annual work plan that you must submit. And of course, there's content that specifically allows you to input data on librarianship, instruction, research, and service. It's taken a while to get used to it. It had some issues, but I'd like to say that it works pretty well now once everyone gets used to the way it formats and outputs the data that you put in. Our narrative statement might be unique. I think a lot of universities do have this, but it's written in the first person, which is always challenging. 3 pages maximum. It is your formal elevator speech. Why do you do what you do? What is your guiding philosophy? The narrative statement is not supposed to be a repeat of what's in your dossier, but rather highlight how you're able to interweave your librarianship, your research, and your service, and how, say, your research impacts and enhances your librarianship, and how that also enhances your service. So the content will vary for 2nd, 4th, and 6th years. And I know personally, I wrote about 25 versions of my narrative statement before I was done. And I still wrote another one. In terms of accomplishments in your supplemental file, again, those pillars of librarianship, research, and service. And the supplemental file feels a way that archivists can really shine. We can include information about our publications, finding aids, learning objects, guides, the archival exhibits, and the outreach that we do. All those unique things that make archivists stand out from traditional librarianship. There's also internal and external review letters. They are considered confidential. I know that I will never see the external letters that were written for me on behalf of my final tenure review. And in terms of those external letters, at Penn State, you submit a list of other professional colleagues who hold a position similar to yours. You do not need to know the reviewer. You do not have to have worked on a committee with them, but it's someone who you might look up to in a leadership capacity, and they write a letter for you saying whether or not they think your scholarship, your service, and your librarianship are worthy of tenure. So it's a really, really important part of your dossier. So how do you survive all of this? It's stressful, I'll be honest, but it's certainly a good stress in some ways. We have committee reviews at the 2nd, 4th, and 6th years with specific advice. People always say at Penn State, follow the specific advice of your committees to the T. If they tell you, hey, you need to have a leadership capacity by 4th year, you need to serve in a national committee, you need to be elected in a position, then that's what you should strive for. The tenure review requires months to a year. You usually submit it in the fall, and then you wouldn't find out for your final tenure review if you got tenure until the following May. And regardless of whether or not you get tenure, I think celebrating that is a momentous achievement, and my personal philosophy was make yourself proud. Even if you didn't feel that you had a lot of support from colleagues or a lot of support from different people in your academic life, if you did the best you could, then you should be proud of that. So take time to celebrate your achievement. Continue with your research and your service. Keep an updated dossier and vita, and of course your bios, while you're awaiting that final decision. So when you finally become tenured, it is a job for life. At Penn State, the title changes from assistant to associate librarian. You get an increase in salary. Well, that varies. And there's a lot of recognition not only by the teaching faculty who look at you as a peer, but also by university administrators. It's a big deal when you get tenure. It raises the profile, I think, of the library and archives professions. And at Penn State, I'm happy to say that over the past 5 years, we've had a 94% tenure achievement, so a very high success rate. The post-tenure reviews, we still do them. You can't just sit back on your laurels once you get tenure. And I look at it and put it in this framework that it's a continued opportunity for me to get input, ideas, constructive criticism about the work I'm doing. And also in terms of your research, how is it evolving? You can take on new trajectories for your publications and your research. You can also give back in different ways. I love being a mentor and I love helping other people. Part of this webinar makes me feel very satisfied professionally that I can share some of my experiences, both good and bad. And although it's not required at Penn State, you can move from full to a distinguished librarian as well for additional promotion. I think I mentioned this already, we do have annual reviews, and even in the post-tenure environment, we do annual reviews, but there is an extended post-tenure review every 5 years. The work that you do is similar to your initial promotion and tenure process, much less intense or formal. You revise your narrative statement, update your dossier, and there are no external review letters. How do you thrive post-tenure? Well, overall, I think my take-home message, whoops, it advanced too far. Thanks, Liz, is that you have so much greater flexibility with your research. You can work on non-archives or non-library topics. I'm working on a history topic right now. And our research sabbaticals really facilitate that in the post-tenure context. We call it the pause that refreshes. It is not an automatic. You have to apply for a sabbatical. And it'll be considered based upon the quality of your research and your final outcome, as well as staffing capacity. If you're gone, who's going to do your job? So those are things to think about. Your salary could be 100% if you take a 6-month sabbatical or a full year at half pay. And again, every 5 years, you're eligible to do that. So it's an opportunity to do a deep dive, to publish a book. And this slide shows a copy of the Penn State Harrisburg book that I published as my first research sabbatical. So in terms of keeping track of all your research, I highly recommend some kind of a document. This slide shows the research agenda template that I developed where I have my research topics, which fall into my liaison role as American Studies liaison at the School of Humanities. And whenever I come up with an idea, which could be on a train, on a plane, sitting in my house, talking to my family, I immediately go write it down and then think about what my proposed outcome is, and then I keep a list of the status updates. So use something, whether it's a binder like Liz showed, or different ideas that Rachel offered, or this kind of a document, just do something to keep your trajectory going. Other ways you can thrive in the post-tenure environment are new service opportunities. I would encourage everyone to think about allied professions. They really need our archival expertise. There's a lot of oral historians who don't necessarily know archives, or folks in the American Folklore Society. They have special interest groups in all these that I'm mentioning. And you can think about expanded leadership through the State Historical Records Advisory Board, through SAA. Consulting is an area that I've been moving into, and it's been so rewarding going to historical societies and helping them set up their archives. But the biggest thing I would advise is to make sure you don't get overcommitted, because post-tenure, service overcommitment is very common. So I think at this point, we're going to move into our discussion of challenges. I'm going to hand it off to Rachel, I think.
Sorry, that was lit. It's me. I pressed a button. We're getting used to Zoom. I pressed a button. The whole thing went away. My apologies to everybody there. I thought the stop share was the remote control. Anyway, we are going to talk about challenges. Actually, the first one is librarian and teaching. Hi, Rachel, you're going to be talking about that one, correct?
Yes, and I am delighted to talk about it because I have to tell you it's something that I didn't anticipate was being considered a special case when it comes to tenure and promotion criteria and guidelines. And I have to say that sometimes you find yourself being creative on how you fit into the criteria that has been set out for you, which are not necessarily for archivists and sometimes not even for librarians or people in libraries. So, you know, knowing your criteria and then figuring out a way to fit your work into that, it can be a real challenge sometimes. And as Heidi said, sometimes results in many, many drafts of your narrative. In addition, we already mentioned this, but almost all of us serve kind of a dual role as both archivist and librarian. How do we define that in our tenure and promotion materials? That's also a challenge sometimes. And, one of the things that I've seen get left out of junior faculty dossiers, and especially in their first couple years, is metrics that talk about the extent of their work. How many hours did you spend in reference this year? How many classes did you instruct? These are important and really show the scale that of your contribution. And don't leave those out. And they really help document your impact. One of the things that Heidi and Liz and I have all kind of commiserated about is financial support for professional development of archivists and maybe even of librarians is not always sufficient for the amount of contribution that we want to make to our profession, right? If we want to attend several different conferences in a year, we might not have the finances from our department to do that. And so that's something to, one, know about from day one, what your financial restrictions are, and two, to think about how you're going to get the most bang for that buck, because you do still have to show a contribution, but you can't always attend everything. And I know Heidi is going to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face in research and scholarship too.
Thanks, Rachel. Yes, I think research is probably the most terrifying aspect of being on the tenure track. I know for many people it's a barrier to even applying for a position. So with research, there's barriers we talked about at the very outset of this webinar to presenting at national conferences. Barriers to publishing. How do you get a solid research agenda? How do you identify venues for your research? Well, we have a lot of different venues at the very end of our webinar in terms of journal publications. There's also a lot of changes in digital scholarship. Does this webinar matter? Do we list that in our dossier? What about a blog? What about digital collections and things that you curate? And how do you balance all of this with the publish or perish agenda and all the other things that make you, for example, family? There's this great comic from PhD Comics, The Evolution of Intellectual Freedom, which I found quite humorous and adding a little levity to our discussion. But your opportunities for research do evolve depending upon where you're on the tenure track. So just keep in mind that you will have some greater intellectual freedom, but the ability to even publish at all, I think, is one of the benefits of tenure. So next slide, I think. Oh, turning it back over to Rachel.
Oh, sorry. I'm having. No, I think we're on service.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to briefly touch on service. Obviously, you have to do service within your university, so you have to do committees. At ESU, they recommend you be on at least 3 committees. Some committees obviously have more weight than others. If you're, say, on the recycling committee, is that give as much weight to, say, the assessment committee? So you have to kind of pick and choose which is, at this point, especially in a first year, what is good for your career? Should I maybe be on University Senate and then if I have time be on the recycling committee? Sure. You also don't want to overcommit yourself with committees. I know there's someone who is on 14 committees, and that's a lot of committees. I think you have to just be aware of that. And also serving in local, regional, national, and maybe even international organizations. I think we all probably are in a regional and a national organization. Look to those local ones. Maybe it's a historical society that you need to get involved with. The barriers here, though, again, is the funding. How much money can you spend? Maybe your institution pays for your memberships. Then if they do, then by all means, join as many as you want. But like most of us, we have to pick and choose how many we are in. So money can be a barrier. And just don't forget about leadership positions, again, in those organizational things. Like if you've been a member, say, example, in MARAC for 10 years, but you've never been on a committee, or you've never, ran for an office. Think about sort of advancing your career in that way. And then Rachel talked about a little bit about doing service that extends and sort of goes into your research. She's really interested in journal publishing. Well, then maybe that's why she volunteers there, so she can kind of it's like a twofer. You're kind of getting a little more, you're helping with service, but then you're also maybe getting an article out of it or something. So try to pick and choose things that might benefit you as well. And then, like we all said, time for service. Can you really say no? you have to just decide how much you can do, that you can do a good job at the committees and the things that you're, you don't want to do something that's not up to your full capacity. So just think about that.
This was a slide that we thought about not even including, and then we thought, no, people need to hear this because there's a lot of gossip and rumor that goes on to unfortunately inform what people think about tenure and promotion at academic institutions. And we all feel that it's important to get the facts, ask questions, clarify, get it in writing. Don't rely on rumor or what you hear on the street, as they say, to inform what you're going to have to, what you think you're going to have to bring to the table for tenure. One of the other things that is kind of a cultural thing to manage, and really I feel as an opportunity for advocacy, is reputation across campus. Sometimes fellow faculty or administrators don't always recognize librarians and archivists as equals in terms of, the professoriate, right, at the college. If you have a dean or director that can advocate for you and what you bring to the table as a faculty archivist and librarian, make sure that you are relying on them and advocate for yourself. And that final point there is, sometimes if you have a small department, mentoring opportunities for people in your field could be limited. I would encourage you to think interdisciplinary. Who maybe is your ally in the English department, who's your superior, a senior faculty member that could help you along if there's really no one in your department. So that's kind of another interesting challenge just for archivists and librarians.
The last challenges slide. I think this is Heidi. So the thing that nobody wants to talk about, what happens if you don't earn tenure? What do you do next? Well, I'm here to say that hopefully during the review prior to your submission of your final dossier, someone will have advised you to say, maybe you should think about stepping off the tenure track. There's no shame in that. And I would hope that everyone at least has a good open communication with their administrators so that you avoid being turned down for tenure. I mean, it does happen, and it's unfortunate, but my best advice would be start job seeking right away. Obviously, keep your vita, your bios, and your research up to date, and network, network, network. So final thoughts on tenure. I have these next two slides. We just want to emphasize a couple big things that we might not have mentioned before. The first thing is there's not a magic formula. It really goes back to your criteria, but I would say that you need to have contributions in all areas of whatever pillars are at your institution. Peer-reviewed journal articles is great, but collaborations and solo authorship are also equally valued. You should also strive to have presentations and elected leadership positions within regional, national, and even international organizations. And I can't emphasize enough to make sure you incorporate personal wellness. It goes without saying that you need to make time for yourself. It's okay to take a vacation. Get support however, wherever you can. And something that I've done that was tremendously valuable to me is creating a personal writing or research space, or even connecting with other people who are in a writing group that will encourage you to meet deadlines and or to just to share your scholarship even in an infancy stage. Another topic is definitely tenure stay. Whether you experience a life event, some other kind of hardship, investigate whether or not a tenure stay is an option at your institution. Usually it's a confidential process that stops the tenure clock for a limited time. It should not be a thing that penalizes you or your tenure candidacy. And embrace the idea that working in academia is a lifestyle. Service and research are part of your identity, not just something that you do on the weekends or at night. Many positions do require you to work crazy hours, but it's part of who you are, and it's not something that is just an add-on. It's part of the job.
And just to reiterate, if you don't take time for your research and protect that time and self-advocate, no one else is going to. So people might say, oh yeah, so-and-so's out on vacation, but no, that's not true. We all know you're working on your article, you're working on your research, and protect that time because it's the only way you'll get those deliverables.
And then this is Liz. We just wanted to end on some positive notes. While there are lots of challenges, tenure really does have some nice benefits. like flexible schedules with potential summers off if you have that type of contract, or maybe you can take your research off campus or work at home from a day a week or something. There's a lot of intellectual freedom and the ability to wear many hats. Potential for research sabbaticals, and it's a great way to contribute to scholarship. I mean, lots of collaborations and things you can do, and you can really be a leader in the field of your, field of choice there. Also, faculty governance you can get involved with, and like we said before, job security. It's a job for life, and then also it doesn't hurt to get a little money with it too. So that's about all we have. We do have a couple resource slides. We're just going to breeze through these. If you're interested in journals that accept peer-reviewed publications, this is a really short list, but this blog down here, archivespublishing.com, is great. It sets everything up about writing and all the journals that accept peer-reviewed things. We have great resources of blogs and online resources. If you want to take a look at these links when you get the final link to the webinar. And then Rachel put together this amazing 3 pages of articles all about tenure and librarianship and archivists, and it's just a great resource. So definitely check these out. And again, thank you to the Pennsylvania Library Association and their College and Research Division, and to the series Connect and Communicate. This has been an amazing experience for us to do this, and thank you to Erin and Amy for helping us with this. And I think now we're going to turn it over to some questions and answers. So I think Erin or Amy was going to handle that, correct?
Yep, thanks guys. Yeah, thank you for presenting. We really appreciate it. So if anyone has any questions at this point, feel free to put them in the chat box. And meanwhile, Erin posted the link to the session evaluation in the chat box as well. And she's also requesting if the 3 of you would be willing to share your slides, we can post that with the video when we share that as well. So people would have those article names.
Oh, absolutely. One thing I wanted to mention, Heidi, that I thought was very encouraging was that you have a 94% rate of tenure success at your institution. So that makes me feel a little bit better. That I had also heard from a colleague at ESU that they basically, if they hire you, they want to make sure you get tenure, so that they want you to succeed. So that makes me feel a little bit less stressed about the process, that there are people out there who want you to do this and they don't really want you to fail, essentially.
True. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Liz. And I think that in the library profession, we're all used to helping people. I mean, we're in the business of public service. So it's part of, who we are to reach out and help our colleagues. And there's a lot of support at Penn State, but I'm sure there's a lot of support at other institutions. And honestly, I think sometimes teaching faculty don't even get the same level of mentorship that librarians do for their own dossiers. I'm saying that just sort of across the board. But yeah, we have a really high success rate at Penn State of getting tenure. And the philosophy is if you've been hired, they want you to succeed. And that's probably true almost anywhere, because hiring is an expensive process. So they want you to get tenure.
I would just add on another positive note, a lot of people see an annual evaluation as something scary, and then these big 3-year-at-a-time ones even scarier, but it's really a great time for you to check in and see how you're doing and to get feedback in a low stakes way. So take advantage of those annual evals too.
Right, guys, we have a question. Have you seen any provost resistance to tailoring tenure for librarians?
Was that provost resistance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not at my institution at ESU. We have a provost who's extremely an advocate for the library, so no. It could be, I dare say this in a whisper, more the president. But provost for me, not necessarily. You might, although I would say you could run into that at your institution, that someone is not going to be an advocate or, interested in archivists and librarians, that's for sure.
I can just say that at Rollins, if there had at any moments where administration even indicated that maybe they might not, support librarian or archivist faculty status, the rest of the faculty became very vocal. And that can be a real asset to knowing that your community of fellow educators supports you. And the only way that happens is, of course, if you have good working relationships and respect for those colleagues. So I think part of building your community of colleagues at your college is really building in that trust and respect and letting other people see that that status is valuable.
Yeah, I would just add to that, to follow up on Rachel's comments, that resistance from an administrator, I think that one of the jobs of the university librarian or your dean or whoever is in charge of your library is to have that strong partnership with the academic deans or the academic heads, because librarians, if they have faculty status, the tenure process should not be distinctly different. I mean, we do have different criteria, but there's not a separate, tenure document just for librarians. There's, because librarians and archivists who go up for tenure at Penn State, we go through committees at the university level. So you could have a flutist, a physicist, somebody who's a writing expert in English who's looking at a dossier of a librarian. So it's your job in your narrative and your dossier to describe to those people what you do.
Okay, we have another question. Are there any better or less ideal times and places to help inform other non-library colleagues about the benefits of library/archive staff?
In some ways, I think that's about marketing yourself and your services and how they can help in a classroom or how they can help the research of a faculty member. And I think that's constantly one of the things that archivists and librarians have to be pounding the pavement and making sure they're generating the business of the teaching and learning at the college, right? Reminding people that librarians and archivists can help in those spaces.
I'd like to, if you don't mind, Liz, me jumping in, I'd like to add to that, Rachel, that I feel like, especially as an archivist, that every opportunity that I have to talk to somebody about what I do is advocating for the profession, whether it's a potential donor, a professor. That I know that there's misunderstandings about what tenure is like for librarians. I know that not everybody who's teaching faculty will think an archivist or a librarian even has tenure. So I think really it's up to us to self-advocate, not just for, our jobs, but for the profession as a whole.
Okay, and we have one more question here. We have someone who's coming to the end of their grad school. Is there any advice that you have for them of things that they should be doing, help them start off on the right foot?
Think about a couple really good papers you did and how what you said or did in those papers could be leveraged to a point where you could contribute to the profession and maybe an article.
Yeah, I would just say if you get a chance to maybe do a poster session at SAA or ALA or even a local conference, just show that you're kind of in that academic mode and that you're interested in presenting your research that you did in graduate school. I would say, think about opportunities like that while you're still in school.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Liz and Rachel. There's student chapters of SAA. You can join a profession at a student rate for much cheaper. So while you're still in school, take advantage of that. And, think about what you'd like to research. I always remember Walt Crawford's books have something to say. What do you want to say as a potential tenure track librarian or archivist? And then, when putting together a resume and applying for positions, search committees will be looking for that. Do you already have a record of some scholarship? Do you already have a record of service interests? And that can give you a little bit of a leg up over other candidates.
So hopefully our presenters can stay for a couple minutes. I see that we have another question coming, but I want to kind of wrap up in case anyone needs to go. those of you who registered for today's session, the email that you used to register, you should get a link to this video. So if you have colleagues that you feel could benefit, feel free to share that. It'll also be on our blog page. Again, I wanted to thank our three presenters, Elizabeth, Rachel, and Heidi, for sharing their wealth of information with us, and thank all of you for being here as part of our conversation. So at this point, if you need to go, I totally understand, but for our presenters, we do have some questions from Amanda in our chat box here, that if you're up for answering some more, if you don't have to run, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Sounds good.
All right, so Amanda asks, do you have any templates for your dossier that are tailored to librarians/archivists, or do you follow formats for other non-classroom faculties?
Liz, Rachel, do you want to answer
well,
that?
the librarians in my library, there's 5 of us, we've sort of, well, everybody does it a little bit differently, but we do share our binders with each other, so we see, you know, who's doing, how they're doing it. So essentially I sort of copied my chairs the way she did it, and she just had this really great organizational style, so I kind of adopted her style, but everyone does it differently. They have some guidelines, but there's no exact, especially at my university, an exact science of here's section A, B, C, and D. We do have those components when you do go up for tenure, but for the yearly binders, it's a little bit of a free-for-all, I would say. It's really how you want to present it, and, you know, try to do it in the way that it presents itself best and orderly, and, you know, so that people are able to read it and it flows well, essentially. So unfortunately, we don't really have a template, but I'm happy to share anything, you know, with you if you need suggestions.
I would just add that at Rollins, it is a little bit more structured, but the guidelines that our department set up were written, I think, in 2011. And so they're up for review right now from our department. We have a new, and it's a great time because we have a new director, and so everyone's kind of fresh. So we're going to be taking another look at those guidelines and reevaluating and saying, okay, do archivists and librarians in, you know, 2018 still need to meet these requirements, or are there more, or are there others? So once we redevelop and reapprove, I'm very happy to share that document because I think it will be nicely structured.
And I can chime in quickly because I know it's 2 after 2. We don't necessarily have templates outside of the digital measures environment. That's our tool that we have to use to input data. But before we had digital measures, I essentially took the organization of a strategic plan that I made for archives and special collections that had aspects of archival work that were not in anybody else's dossier. For example, arrangement and description was a good one, or donor relations. Most librarians aren't doing donor and development work. So I took a strategic planning document and used those categories that I have as an archivist and then added them to my dossier so that I can have key tasks related to all of those. So Amanda, I'd be happy to share, you know, anything that I have in terms of your question.
Speaking of sharing, Amanda also asked, would you be willing to share your elevator speech about the benefits of the archival program and your job duties to the campus?
Yes.
Yes. Last question she has, do you have a dictated split of time between librarianship, scholarship, and service?
Yes.
Well, this is Liz. I would say that my first semester, I was so library heavy, it was terrible. And I realized really at the end, I was doing probably almost 75% library stuff. And I was kind of panicking. I'm not doing my job, my real job, which is the archives. So for me, that was a learning curve. So the next semester, I switched that totally. And now I'm less, for me, I've structured it so I'm less library heavy. I think the one aspect that gets left out is, I would suspect we all have that, is the scholarship. It's the hardest for me to fit in. I'd say I do it 15% of the time. If I had to give it, I'd like to do it 25% of the time, but it's just not quite there. That's why there's vacations and nighttime and breaks and stuff like that. That's really where I get my writing done. So just be aware. It's good to be aware of how much time you are spending on something, because you want to make sure it's balanced and level. Good question.
I can jump in unless Rachel, you wanted to say something first.
No, go ahead.
Oh, we don't have a dictated split of time between the 3 pillars of librarianship, research, and service, but in our annual goal statement, we do divide it literally by a percentile. So, you know, I probably spend 60% of my time doing librarianship, and, you know, it varies. You know, some years it's 30% scholarship and then only 10% service, but anymore it's more like 50 and 25 and 25. So it really does vary, and also depends on the year, right? Like, I don't have summers off. I work a 12-month appointment, so every fall and semester I don't get as much research done, and that's really like my summertime to do that. And service happens all throughout the year, but it's not dictated. I control what I want to do.
Yeah, I would echo Heidi and Elizabeth's points, and I would just emphasize that it's really healthy to think about those percentages, because if I was honest with myself, I would be stepping back a little bit from my librarianship roles and putting that time and effort into, you know, basically digital preservation efforts in archives. And because we've had short staff at the library recently, that percentage has been higher. It's really important to think about those percentages, because it will matter when it comes to what you bring to the table in these reviews.
Yeah, and we probably all have to do some kind of a work plan, and we all know, you know, you might write this great work plan, and there's all these other things that sort of creep in that you didn't even expect would happen, right? So that's just the nature of, I think, what we do.
Agreed. I mean, you all write down your goals for the semester, and then half of them are thrown out the window in a week.
All right, well, it looks like that's all our questions. We have some other thank yous in the chat box.
Thank you.
At this point, I think we'll stop the recording and just again thank our presenters. And the evaluation link Erin posted again in the chat box for everyone.